morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody that is here today. We would love to welcome you to the next step in our series of Ask Your Case Manager. We are going to discuss the top 10 common questions from our wonderful nurse applicants. But before we come on in, we'd love to make introductions. I am Marlo Bench. I'm Director for RN Case Management here at WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions. We have with us Christian Anguiano. He's in our Idaho office. We'd like to welcome Amanda Williams. I think everybody remembers Amanda. She's been on some other webinars, and she is one of our senior case managers, as well as Christian. And then behind me, we have Kim Cole, who will be working on the chat today. She is also a director for case management. She works with our nurse aides. So we're really, really happy to be here. Thank you so much to all of our attendees. We always love to know where you're from. So if you'd like to pop in the chat which country you're tuning in from, we also love to know who your case manager is. So we'd love to hear that today. And with that, I think we will just kick it off. So we based our webinar today on really the top 10 topics that case management really gets asked about a lot. And we thought we'd try and provide a little bit of information that would be helpful for everybody out there. So we're going to do this in order from 10 all the way up to our probably most asked question, number 1. Christian, I'm going to kick it off with you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marlo. Yeah, so we're going to start off with number 10. And number 10, the question that goes with that is how to add dependents and any other significant life changes. Now with this, this involves, wanting to add a spouse, wanting to add children. There's obviously, some of the nurses that have adopted children. In those situations, the process to be able to add a dependent is typically you're going to want to add the dependent at stage 3. Stage 3 is the best time to add a dependent just because it allows for there to be no delays throughout the process. If you were to add a dependent later on, it would typically have to end up being at stage 7, which could end up, causing the fee bill to be pushed back further or the documentarily qualified letter to be pushed back further. So stage 3 is really the best time to be able to add a dependent. Now,
that's a good point, Christian. Sorry, yeah. I wanted to throw that in. We don't want to have any delays, so hop on right at the beginning of your petition. Exactly.
Yep. Like I said, the best time is to do it at stage 3, right when you're submitting those I-140 documents. But you're able to add a dependent throughout the process for the most part. From in stage 5 and 6, when your petition's being filed and your petition's being approved, unfortunately, you can't add a dependent during that time just because your file has already been sent to USCIS. But anytime after that, you're able to add a dependent. But like I said, it's always best to add a dependent in stage 3 with your I-140 documents. Now, how to add a dependent? You're going to have to provide the birth certificate, your dependent's passport, and then if you're married, you're going to have to provide that marriage certificate. Now, these all have to be the original copies of those certificates and passports in order to be able to have your dependent added to your petition.
We get asked a lot, Christian, which one is the best certificate? And if you're in the Philippines, we always suggest to do the PSA.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep. The PSA is the one that the government will only accept. They unfortunately will not accept any other ones. So be sure to provide a PSA passport or PSA birth certificates and marriage certificates if it's from the Philippines. Thank you, Marlo, for throwing that in there. And the other thing, obviously the portion of this question is also how to, add any significant life changes. So if you were to get married or if you were to have a baby throughout the process, it's not an extremely difficult process to be able to add a dependent throughout the time. Like I had mentioned, you just got to provide those documents, inform your case manager, and your case manager will go ahead and move forward and inform the attorney that you would like to add a dependent, whether it be a spouse or whether it be a child that was recently born. and they'll provide those documents to the attorney. Now, if you have a dependent that you would like to change from a company to follow to join, or if you have a dependent that you would like to change from follow to join to a company, that's a different process. You're going to have to inform your case manager on what you would like to do, depending on the change of status that you would like your dependent to have. Now, for those of you that don't know what a company and follow to join mean, a company essentially means that the dependent that you have on your petition will follow you to the U.S. at the time that you will be coming to the U.S. So they will be accompanying you to the U.S. when you travel. Now, follow to join means that they'll end up following you after you travel to the U.S. and you will petition for them once you're in the U.S. to come to the U.S. with you after you've already landed here. With the follow to join, you wouldn't have to pay a fee bill. You wouldn't have to provide their civil documents at all, or fill out a DS-260 on their behalf. So you wouldn't have to do any of that information. You would do all of that information later on once you have already arrived in the U.S. Whereas accompanying, you would have to do all of that in order for them to travel with you to the U.S. when you travel. And so I think those are really the basic things pertaining to how to add a dependent and any other significant life changes. Marla, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Amanda or Kim can correct me, when it comes to follow to join, it is possible to change status throughout the petition. So let's say you have your dependents there down as a company, and then further on closer to your immigration, life changes, things happen, and you need to change their status to follow to join. That is also possible. And it's fine if you've already paid their fee bill and submitted their civil documentation. That's where our fabulous attorneys come in, and they're able to make all those things happen. So again, just reach out to your case manager should you have any life changes there and need to change their status from a company to follow to join. I think that was the only thing that came up for me.
Great. Sounds good. I'll go ahead and move it to the next number 9 here, and I'll turn it over to Marlo.
All right. My favorite question: why is my case manager not responding? So we want to put everybody's mind at ease. Our number one priority each day when we come into the office and have our meetings, and when our senior case managers are touching base with all of our colleagues, it is what is the best way to be able to help our nurses feel confident and supported and at ease, and how can we get through the really large influx of emails that we get regularly faster and more efficiently, because we want everybody to feel supported and important. So I came up with just a couple things. First of all, I know emailing maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times thinking that your case manager didn't get your other email is, and I've done it myself, I think probably Christian's done it too, would be a logical thing to do. I will just let everybody know that sometimes that can push you further down, because our case managers, some of them prioritize from the oldest email sometimes to the newest email at the very end, because they want to make sure that they're covering the oldest email that they have to make sure nobody's waiting a significant amount of time. So when you send more than 3 or 4 or 5 emails, it just kind of moves you further down the line, if that made sense. The second thing that's really important is emailing a previous case manager is probably not a great idea. Oftentimes that previous case manager might be in a different department or no longer with WorldWide. And then what happens is your email gets a little bit lost, and we never want to overlook anything important, any emergency or something urgent you might have. And I would probably say the last thing is about Saran. We love him. He is amazing. Everybody at WorldWide feels the same way that you guys do, but he is the CEO of WorldWide HealthStaff. And as much as he is wanting to hear from you and is absolutely capable of answering any of your questions, I'm pretty sure you can imagine how busy he is on a regular basis. So it is better just to always direct all of your inquiries to your case manager. And then that way, it is the most direct line of communication, probably the best practice, because we never want you missed or the communication to be dropped somehow or any important information to be lost or forgotten. So lastly, we do want to hear from everybody. We get emails saying, I'm really sorry I'm emailing you about this. It's probably not that important. We never want to hear that. Every question you have is extremely important. We want to be able to put your mind at ease. Should you have concerns, should you be worried, please, please, please always reach out to your case manager and be very specific. Let them know what you're thinking and you're feeling, and they're ready. They're ready for that. That's their sole responsibility, is to take good care of you and make sure that you understand what comes in the process or where you're at currently in the immigration process.
Of course, yeah. I would just like to add too, I think something that a lot of us case managers, we really try to emphasize is how much we truly care about all of the nurses that we work with. We definitely don't want any of our nurses to feel like they're being neglected or feel like they're not being answered or anything like that their concerns aren't being answered. We really try to do our best in being able to respond to every single email, being able to respond to every single question or concern. And so we just want you to know that we're really doing our best to help you out. And like Marlo was saying, these little things will really help us as case managers be able to even respond to you faster, more efficiently, and be able to give you the answers and the information that you need to be able to go throughout the immigration process like we want to help you do. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christian, again for enforcing. We really do care. We care a great deal. We talk about all of you, and you're very close to our hearts, and some of your situations really touch our lives and are good influence for us and the things that we do. So don't ever think you're just a number or a nameless person. You all mean something to us. So Christian, let's go take a look at what number 8 would be.
Yes. So number 8 is, what does CGFS do? Now, CGFS is a certification organization essentially, and they're the ones that provide the visa screen and the CES report. Those documents are needed for the immigration process, the visa screen especially. Now, the CES report is needed for the I-140 documents as well as licensure. With the visa screen, I think this is the one that typically a lot of people talk about and know the most about. Sorry, excuse me. And with the visa screen, the required documents are the secondary school information. So this would be, your bachelor's degree. They're going to need, your diploma, everything like that pertaining to your secondary school, because they got to ensure that, your secondary school is matching the needs of the bachelor's degree here in the U.S. They're going to need a license, registration, and diploma information. So this would be all of your licensings that you've had over the years from your home country. And if you've moved to a different country and are working as a nurse, they're going to need those licenses as well. So this would be all of your nurse licenses that you've had throughout the years that you've worked as a nurse. You're going to have the professional education information. Now, this would be your transcripts that you would have from your secondary school. They're going to need that information. I know that there's some issues with that sometimes in the length of time that it takes to be able to get those transcripts from specific universities and stuff like that. So a lot of times with these visa screens, we typically have our nurses begin working on them as soon as possible, just because of the fact that some of these documents to provide to CGFS can take a little bit of time to be able to get those. And obviously the last two is a photo of yourself. And then we have the English exam. Now the English exam could be the IELTS or the TOEFL. Those exams have to be completed in order to be able to complete your visa screen. And that's typically why we have, like I said, that we have our nurses begin working on the visa screen as soon as possible, just because a lot of times the IELTS and the TOEFL exam can be difficult to be able to complete, along with providing these documents. So the sooner that we can get our nurses working on these things allows for the nurse to be able to ultimately move forward even faster once they get to the fee bill stage, which is when the visa screen is required in order for the fee bill to be paid. So keep that in mind whenever you have your case manager reach out to you and inform you, hey, you should start working on your visa screen. Understand that the reason why they're having you work on the visa screen as of that moment, even though it might seem like it's very soon in the process, is because of the fact that it can take a while to be able to actually receive the visa screen certificate in order to be able to move forward past the fee bill stage. Now, with the IELTS and the TOEFL, there's specific requirements that need to be met. And this is why it takes a little bit of time to be able to complete the IELTS and TOEFL exam. I don't want anyone's hopes to be, shot down or anything like that, because we've had a lot of people be able to complete the IELTS and TOEFL exam. It isn't impossible. We do have people that complete it on a regular basis. It just takes time. It takes, a lot of studying, a lot of hard work, but it is possible for sure. So any of you that are struggling to complete this at this time, don't feel upset or downtrodden or frustrated. This is a common thing that does happen, and you're not the only one that's facing this currently. There's a lot of people that are also facing this at this time, and we're always here to help. We have information to help you be able to study for that, and we're more than happy to help you with anything that you might need. But with the IELTS exam, you are required to meet a score for speaking specifically is a 7.0. And then for an overall score, you have to reach a 6.5. And this is the typical one that a lot of people use, is the IELTS exam. And so just keep that in mind, that that's the score that you have to reach. Now with the TOEFL for the speaking, it has to be a 26. If I'm not mistaken, Marlo, is that correct? That's 26
Golly,
for TOEFL.
I am not great with the TOEFL score, although I will say I think we're finding that the TOEFL is more widely accepted than what we thought previously. So if you're finding that IELTS is a real challenge, maybe you might want to shift your focus and look at if the TOEFL is a better fit for you. I will throw in one thing. We do have a wonderful specialist that will be assisting us very soon to help with the IELTS and TOEFL preparation. And we're really, really, really excited about that. So I apologize for not knowing the score. Kim or Amanda, do you happen to know the TOEFL scores at all?
Yeah.
It is 26.
It's 26?
Yes. Okay. And then it's 83 for overall, correct, Amanda?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good. And then the last portion is the CES report. Now, like as I mentioned earlier, the CES report, is needed for the I-140 documents. Now, you don't have to have a CES report for the I-140. You can also have a Carnegie evaluation, which is equivalent to a CES report. But a CES report is typically what a lot of nurses already have. So to be able to provide a CES report for the I-140 documents is great. And then, like as I mentioned, the CES report sometimes is needed for licensure. And that's where you'll end up working with our licensure specialist to be able to figure out whether or not a CES report is needed for the state that you're assigned to. But is there anything else that you would like to add, Marlo?
I think I would say it's really tough with CGFS being one of the only credentialing organizations. I think there are very few out there, and they're probably top, if not number one, and they are really backlogged a lot of times. So it's frustrating when your transcripts and your documentation is waiting at CGFS to be assessed, and sometimes it can take a really, really long time. So I would say probably just because they are being inundated with lots and lots of documentation on a regular basis. And Christian's right. We like to encourage people to work on their language proficiency really early on. It's tough. It would be tough for me to take that exam. So the fact that anybody else that didn't grow up speaking English can do that, I take my hat off to you. We do every day. You probably speak better English than I do. So it can be a really, really challenging exam. We know people get discouraged if they don't pass it. Sometimes they don't pass it more than once. Please do not lose heart. Just keep practicing, keep studying. You will pass that exam, and we will patiently wait as long as everybody's proactively working towards getting that done. Your case manager is going to be super supportive while you work through that journey. I call it a journey. So the sooner you can get it done, the better.
Definitely. Thank you, Marlo.
You bet.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on to number 7.
All right. Number 7, when do I submit my I-140 documents? We get asked all the time, is there a deadline or a cutoff, or what is the best timeline for that? Well, when your case manager reaches out and gives you the list of documents that are required, and one of those oftentimes is going to be a education equivalency, and we like to use Carnegie, and we have that link. It's provided to you when your case manager reaches out in that correspondence. We'd like to get that done in no more than about 2 weeks. I will say I love my nurses that give it to me in 2 days. Oftentimes I'll request those documents and I will get them back sometimes the same day, which is wonderful. Why do we have a timeline deadline? It's so the attorneys can really be able to draft your petition appropriately. So let's say we might have missed something in case management. That gives the attorney time to review and go over and make sure everything meets all the requirements, so that when the petition is done being drafted, they can get that filed in a timely manner. So there is one document that is absolutely needed, and it's probably one of our toughest ones to get because there is a big wait for it. But that official NCLEX pass letter, which is the one with your beautiful little face on it, we do need that pass letter. The Pearson view will work temporarily, and sometimes the USCIS will accept it, but oftentimes they will not. And then we don't want to file your petition with just the Pearson view and then end up getting an RFE, which is really discouraging for everybody. I'm telling you, your case manager gets super discouraged whenever an RFE pops up. Now, we have great attorneys and they can maneuver around that, and typically the response times RFEs are really they're really efficient. So not to worry, the attorneys are on that, but that is why we want to make sure that we have all the correct documentation at the very beginning so that we don't run into those hiccups later. So if at all possible, if you don't have your official NCLEX pass letter right now, please, please, please make sure that you reach out to that Board of Nursing and get that. That would be wonderful. I know that recently we've had some hiccups with Texas. It is Texas, right?
Yeah,
Texas. Yeah. Texas, for whatever reason, is giving everybody a hard time with providing the official pass letter. So in a situation like that, all you can do, if you actually have your current Texas licensure, provide that. We can go on Nurses and get some documentation from Nurses as well as your Pearson view. But for whatever reason, Texas is kind of pushing back a little bit on getting that official pass letter out. And if we find out why, or if we find out when that changes, we will absolutely let everybody know. So am I missing anything? Hop on anytime if I forgot something.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I think one other thing that I would like to add is going along with why we have a 2-week essential, soft deadline is just because of the fact that, in order for us to be able to begin working on your petition, we have to have those documents. So the sooner that we can get those documents submitted to us, the faster we can begin working on your petition. And unfortunately, if those documents aren't submitted, your petition hasn't begun. And so it just delays the process of the immigration process even longer because of the fact that we haven't been able to start on your petition. So just keep that in mind, that the sooner you get the I-140 documents submitted to us, the sooner we can work on your petition and the faster you can get through the process. Now, the later you submit those I-140 documents, the longer it takes for the process to even begin, and it delays the process even more. So just keep that in mind. We want to help you as much as possible. So if you can get those documents submitted to us as soon as possible, that is going to be beneficial not only for us, but also for you with your immigration process.
Thanks, Christian. Another thing came to mind, and our candidates probably already know this, but we have several different attorneys, and some of them are in-house, which are fantastic because we have an opportunity to see them one-on-one, face-to-face, and then a lot of our attorneys that we use are not in-house. And so they are located in a different state. But nonetheless, we have communication with them regularly, daily. They're very responsive. But I wanted maybe to throw that out there in case all of our nurses thought that perhaps we just work with in-house attorneys. So yeah. I think that's it. All right. And if Amanda has any thoughts on that, I will pop over to number 6.
Thank you, Marlo. Yeah. So number 6, when should I begin working on my license? Now, this is something that we get a lot of questions about, when to start working on my licensure, how to work on my licensure, what are the steps of working on my licensure. Now, there's obviously going to be a lot of questions about licensure, especially recently. I think we all know, especially those that are, further on in the process. There's been a lot of changes with some states as to how to receive your licensure, either by endorsement or by examination. And, during this time, I would highly recommend that you talk with your licensure specialist if you're at that stage. To be able to talk with them. They're the ones that are going to be able to provide you with the most information on how to get your license and the best process of how to do so. Now, with that being said, when to begin working on your licensure? You will begin working with the licensure specialist in stage 9B. Yeah. Before that, you don't really have to worry about licensure, just because of the fact that licensure sometimes can take, it's a time-sensitive thing. So if you were to receive your license in earlier than stage 9B, it could cause you end up having to go back and renew your license and provide even more information. So the reason why we don't start working on licensures till stage 9B, which is closer to the end of the process, is so that way it prevents that from happening. We don't have to go ahead and renew your license at any moment. We wouldn't have to provide any further documentation. Because we've already provided that, and you'll begin working roughly around the time that you receive your license. Also, there are some states that require a social security number in order to receive your license. So, starting it earlier just you end up having to provide other documentation, like I had mentioned, because your social security number hasn't been received yet. And, the documents that you provided can either expire before you actually receive your social security number. So just keep that in mind. That's the reason why we start that process a little bit later, just because of the fact that, we don't want to prevent, or we don't want to have anybody, having to renew any documents or having to start the process for their licensure all over again, because of the fact that it took too long to be able to actually arrive in the US to receive their social security number. There's 2 different ways to apply for your licensure. Like I have down here, you can apply by endorsement, and that means that you currently are holding a USRN license, and you're applying to a different state with that USRN license to be able to receive the license in that state. Now, there's another process called applying by examination. So if you were to not have your license, a lot of these are typically those that receive their NCLEX in California, just because California doesn't provide their license without a social security number, which doesn't allow you to be able to obtain a license. And so a lot of times these nurses won't receive a license until they're ready to begin working, or they're going through the immigration process. And so they'll apply by examination to the specific state that they're going to be assigned to. And, as I mentioned, applying by examination means that you don't have your license currently, and you're going to be receiving your first official license in the United States, and that's where the applying by examination will take place. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any specific questions about licensure and you're at stage 9B, or by all means talk with your licensure specialist. Like I said, they're the experts with licensure. They study up on their assigned states on a frequent basis to be able to provide you with the best information possible as to what and how to receive your license in that specific state. So they'll be able to help you with everything that you need pertaining to licensure. Anything you want to add, Marlo?
Yeah, absolutely. When Christian mentioned that they spend a lot of time studying on state licensure, they probably spend hours and hours on the phone with the boards of nursing, because we're noticing that some of the boards of nursing are recently just kind of changing up their requirements a little bit. Another reason we try not to jump on licensure too early is that some of those states will issue a temporary license. And oftentimes that's good for 6 months. So 9B typically tends to be a good spot to start working on that, so that you don't run out your temporary licensure period of time, that validation period. So yeah, we hesitate to give a lot of licensure information just because it's so varied and there's so much of it. And we would never, ever want to give you misinformation and then have our poor licensure team have to backtrack and then clean that up. But as Christian was mentioning, there are a lot of states that require a social security number in order for your licensing to go through. And oftentimes I think maybe a score transfer is somewhat helpful with that and trying to bypass, having to wait to get your license with your social security number. I know Florida is another state, as well as California. I know we've had some licensure updates in Indiana. So should any of you have any questions, please reach out to your case manager, and then also reach out if you have an assigned specialist, by all means reach out. Now, if anybody has a question before 9B, we still want to get your questions. We're totally great with that. You can just let us know and we will put you in contact with a specialist, and they are more than happy prior to 9B to answer whatever concerns you have. And I think that's about it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marlo.
Thanks.
We'll go ahead and move on to number 5.
What is a reconfirmation letter? I can tell you right now, there's probably 500 nurses going, reconfirmation letter, because that is one of the most major documents that we deal with. It's so important to the success of your embassy interview. So a reconfirmation letter is a letter that reinforces, concurs your original contract, your original offer letter. We have a reconfirmation letter so that when you attend your embassy interview, you are providing your original offer letter, and then you are also providing the reconfirmation letter. So you are reconfirming to the embassy, yes, this is my employer. Yes, they are my petitioner. I still have a contract with them. This is really, really important. So that's the number one reason why we have a reconfirmation letter. Oftentimes we'll have nurses get to the embassy and unfortunately couldn't get their reconfirmation letter in time. We've noticed some embassies booking appointments and giving only just a few days, which is really frustrating for all of us. And as we are requesting these letters from all of our clients all over North America, it can be a challenge sometimes to get them back in a timely fashion. And so if you're in a situation like that, please do not worry when you go to your embassy interview. Everything will be fine. You can still submit your reconfirmation letter after that's done. All you do is once you get that document is you send that into the embassy, and then that requirement is met. So the reconfirmation letter really just has to state current date, that you currently still have the same petitioner or employer, so they have to match from your offer letter to your reconfirmation letter, and the wage listed on your reconfirmation letter cannot be less than what your original offer letter was. It has to be the same, or it can be more. So I want to address the concerns our nurses sometimes have when they get the reconfirmation letter and they're like, "Ma'am Marlo, why is my wage not as high as it should be?" Not to worry, that's really where your employer takes over. That's when you have an opportunity to start meeting with your HR point of contact and you start working on your onboarding with your employer. Then you get a chance to sit down and go over wage and a possible increase, and all of those questions can be addressed at that time with your employer. As WorldWide, we love you, but we facilitate everything. So we act as your liaison, your go-between, and we are not able to comment to wage, and that one is just not in our scope of practice, but that definitely is with your employer. So last thing we get asked, and the big worry is, why is my letter not notarized? And I will say that each embassy kind of has their own requirements. It's a bit of a challenge because sometimes the embassies will change those requirements and we're not always aware. We do know that if your interview is going to be in Manila, you definitely need a notarized letter. Although there are many, many embassies, such as Abu Dhabi, they do not require your letter to be notarized. So in a situation like this, if you need a notarized letter, it's going to be sent out, FedExed, so that you have that physical copy with the wet signature and the notary. So that's the copy you're going to bring with you. Should you not need it to be notarized, then the embassies will accept the letter that doesn't have the wet signature. So it will come to you as a PDF attachment from your case manager. And if that's the case, then you print that out and then you take that letter with you. And that is accepted if it does not need to be notarized. So there's probably a lot more to talk about in regards to reconfirmation letters. But if I were to kind of pick the top two really important things with case management, one would always be helping with the visa screen. And two, it would be, let's get those reconfirmation letters done. It is just as important to us as it is to you. So I want you to know we work really, really hard on working with our employers to get those done in a timely manner. And I'm sure there's lots more to talk about that. Did I forget anything, Christian or Amanda?
I would say one thing that is also really important with the reconfirmation letters is just understanding that the employer won't send a reconfirmation letter unless you're meeting their working requirements.
Yeah.
That's something that's really important, especially when it comes to the later stages. We have to be meeting the working requirements of the employer in order to receive that reconfirmation letter. So please keep that in mind. If you ever have, your case manager let you know that you should begin working or that you have to begin working, it's not because we're the ones that are dictating whether you work or not. It's your employer, and your employer won't send a reconfirmation letter on your behalf if you're not meeting those requirements. So please keep that in mind. Please continue to work as a bedside nurse as much as possible, so that way there's no issues when it comes to receiving a reconfirmation letter. But besides that, I have nothing else that I'd like to add.
Thank you, Christian. That is a huge point. And then that also brought to mind, you will also have a tough time getting your reconfirmation letter if your Lippincott isn't done. So our specialist, Serene, we love Serene. She's lovely. She will reach out to you and work with you on getting your Lippincott certification. Please, around 9B, you're going to hear from her. Make sure you get that done in a timely manner so that by the time we need a reconfirmation letter, you're certified, you've done your course, and then we can just go ahead and get that reconfirmation letter as quickly as possible. So thank you again for talking about work requirements. That's also a very big deal. All right, we're on to the next slide. Christian.
Yeah, of course. So number 4 is, can I expedite my embassy interview? Now, this is a great question, and I think there's a lot of different scenarios that would allow for nurses to be able to expedite their embassy interview. I would say one of the biggest reasons that a nurse would expedite their embassy interview is if they have a child who's going to be aging out. A lot of times, especially in those situations, if your child is about to age out, the embassy and the embassy will most likely allow for an expedited embassy interview because of that. Now, there are other situations. Recently we had, the COVID-19 virus that was going around in all of the world, and that was a big reason for a lot of nurses being expedited as well. There's a lot of different scenarios that allow for a nurse to be expedited to their embassy interview. Now, some things that I want to talk about is, when can the nurse expedite their embassy interview? And I think this is extremely important, that a nurse should only expedite their embassy interview when they are at stage 9B. And stage 9B is when you're documentarily qualified. So you've received a letter from the NVC stating that you've met all of their requirements, you've submitted all of your documents, and you are now currently waiting in line for an embassy interview. Now, that should be the only time that anybody submits an expedited request for an embassy interview, because of the fact that if we do it before then and you do receive an embassy interview that's been expedited, it can cause some issues in the fact that all of your documents haven't been sent to the NVC, which could end up causing delays and you possibly a 221G being issued at the embassy interview because not all documents were received and not all fees were paid. So please do not expedite your embassy interview before stage 9B. That's something that I really wanted to talk about. The other thing is how to expedite an embassy interview. And I know that there's a lot of people that ask this. So pay attention, because this is something that you'll be able to do if this is something that applies to you at stage 9B. So how it works is you'll send an email to the NVC expedite at state.gov, which is their email address, and you're going to provide the following information. You'll provide your full name, your date of birth, the NVC case number, your priority date, the petitioner's name, your current address and phone number. And then in the body of the message as well, you'll provide an explanation as to why you're requesting for an expedited embassy interview. And this is where what I was talking about earlier. This could be if you have a dependent that's aging out, or if you're trying to provide relief to the nurses in the US on behalf of, because of COVID-19. There's different reasons as to why people are requesting for an expedited embassy interview. So you'll just put that explanation as to why at the bottom of your email to the embassy. Now, the other big thing that I would really like to emphasize is that, unfortunately, WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions has no say in whether or not a nurse is expedited. If it was up to us, every nurse that we work with would be expedited, because we want, obviously, all of you to be able to come to the US as soon as possible. However, the embassy and the NVC are the ones that make those decisions as to whether or not a nurse is expedited. So if you have a friend that was expedited and you unfortunately were not, don't be frustrated with your case manager, because unfortunately the case manager has no say and leeway as to whether or not a nurse is able to be expedited. Unfortunately, that is all determined by the embassy and the NVC. Obviously we want to help you out as much as possible, but with those situations, we unfortunately don't have anything that we can say or do to sway the embassy or the NVC in any direction. So is there anything else that you would like to add, Marlo, to that?
Yeah, expediting is really such a tough call. We never know how that's going to go. We see a lot of nurses request expediting and it goes through really easily. And then others that actually get turned down their first time and have to do it another second, perhaps maybe even a third time, and then they're successful. We've seen appointments actually being expedited unbeknownst to us, and that means case manager and nurse. Sometimes I have nurses emailing me saying, I just received this email. Does this mean I actually have my embassy interview? And the MVC has gone and expedited it without any of us knowing. That can be a bit of a challenge. And I think it's due to what Christian brought up earlier. Perhaps if you have a dependent that's aging out, they can see that there's an urgency and a need to do this as quickly as possible. Definitely the pandemic changed all of our lives all over the world. And that was a big worry for us. We were really hoping to get things expedited a little bit more so that we could get you nurses to where you needed to be. We want to see you fulfill your American dream. You are frontline people. You are sacrificing daily for us. We just can't have enough respect and thanks for everything that you do. So when it comes to expediting, MVC only takes one request every 60 days. That is also kind of frustrating. So oftentimes if we reach out to the MVC and we're requesting something, they won't honor another request for another 60 days. If you go into Ask NVC, try not to go into that link if you can, because I believe that's really where they only allow one request every 60 days. So expediting just is kind of an unknown territory for us as case managers. But what we will do is we'll just take it one step at a time. Let us know if you get an email that looks like perhaps you have an expedited appointment, and we will work on that as soon as possible for you. I think that's all I can think of about expediting, Christian.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, number 3.
Number 3, Christian touched on this earlier. Do I need to maintain my bedside experience? Oh, golly, there's so many different answers to that question. But I think the best answer to that is yes, you do. You definitely need to remain in bedside experience throughout the immigration process. Some nurses have had the experience way back to the time they were recruited during their interview and were recruited and perhaps maybe weren't currently working at that time. And that was okay. And they got their contract and that was great with the employer at that time. But this tends to be a little bit of a confusion for a lot of our nurses. Sometimes they think then that they still do not need to get back into work, that it's still fine for them to not be in bedside care. And that is not correct. Your employers want you to be current. They want you to be up to date. They want you to be hands-on. They want you to be working with patients and patient care. And I think every employer's qualifications and guidelines could be a little bit different, but for the most part, it would need to be a minimum of part-time or PRN shifts. And if you actually need the number of hours that part-time would be, I know with dialysis, it's a minimum of 8 hours a month. And in regards to the other employers, you would probably need to contact your case manager to get really specific about that. But I would dare say probably 20 hours a week would be accepted. Sometimes it can be 25 hours a week. So again, that minimum part-time might vary depending on which employer you're contracted with. And the last big question we get asked at the time that people are working on their visa screen is, can I quit my job so that I can focus on working on my visa screen? No, we don't want you to do that. I realize that life is really, really challenging. It is not lost on us that you are working double shifts, extra hours. You are working many, many days without breaks in between. Our hearts truly, truly go out to you. But we strongly discourage you to not resign, to focus on another requirement. Your employer does not want that. And as we are the emissary of your employer, we are honestly trying to give you the best practices to make you the most successful, to make your immigration the most successful. And resigning is not one of those things that we encourage. Now, however, we have had some nurses in some pretty emergent situations. By all means, we will review that and take a look at what season you are at in your life and in your nursing career. And there are always exceptions to the rule, but I would just love to reinforce again, please maintain your bedside experience. Please make sure it's at least minimum part-time. Should you need to resign and you haven't told your case manager, do not be afraid. Please tell your case manager, just let them know. They really, really need to know. We need an updated CV every 6 months. And so sometimes our nurses hesitate to provide that CV every 6 months because perhaps they're not employed anymore and they're a little bit worried to tell their case manager. Don't ever worry. That's our job, is to sit there and be supportive and help you work through whatever challenge that is. So should you have not been employed and just didn't tell your case manager, it is okay. We will work with you on that and we'll give you lots of tips and suggestions on how to get back on track with your immigration and what your employer would want.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing, especially when it comes to maintaining bedside experience, is really for you nurses. We want to allow you to be able to have the best experience when you arrive in the U.S.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're not working during that time throughout the immigration process, when you begin working in the US, one, it's different in the experience that you received in your home country, because the work culture and the way the processes are done here is different. The medication that's provided, the equipment that's used, there's a lot of differences in everything pertaining to the specific assigned location that you'll be working in. But then it's also staying up to date with the practices of being a nurse. We all know that processes change within nursing periodically, systems change. We just want to make sure that when you arrive in the US that you're also able to, one, provide the best care for the employer and the patients that you're going to be working with, but also for you to be able to feel more comfortable when you arrive in the US. So that way you don't feel out of practice or you feel inadequate to perform certain tasks and duties. It's also really looking out for you as the nurse as well, just to ensure that you have a good transition to the US and begin working here.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Christian. I totally agree with that. We care about you, and should you not have been working for a significant amount of time, coming here and adjusting to life in the US is a challenge in and of itself. And then working for a new employer is also really scary. And then getting back into working bedside and in a different country with different requirements, as Christian was saying, could really all kind of culminate together to be a very tough transition to the US. So it is really absolutely, as Christian said, in your best interest to maintain bedside. Probably that's one of the biggest reasons.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. All right, we are ready to hop on to number 2, and we're coming to the end of our top 10 questions. And my gosh, the hours have gone by so quickly.
I know. Yeah, it's been a great experience. So thank you everyone for joining us and being a part of this. Number 2, can I transfer embassy locations? Now, this is a great question, and we get this question frequently, with people that are trying to transfer the embassy to a location where they're currently living. And the best time to transfer your embassy location is pretty much as soon as you receive your fee bill. If you notice on your fee bill that you're currently not living in the assigned or in the country of the assigned embassy interview location, inform your case manager, and they'll be happy to help you be able to make that transition to a different location. Obviously you could do it later than that. You can go all the way up until stage 9B when you're documentarily qualified. But we would highly recommend that you do it earlier on. Stage 7A and stage 8A are the best times to be able to make that transfer. Just because if you do it at a later stage, it could cause some delays in being able to receive an embassy interview notice. And obviously we don't want that for anyone. We want to make sure that our nurses are being able to have their embassy interview as soon as possible, and making a transfer later on in the process, like I said, can have a delay on being able to receive that embassy interview notice. How to make that embassy transfer is actually fairly simple. All you have to do is you have to provide a proof of residency for the area that you want to have your embassy transfer to. Now, that proof of residency has to have your name, and it has to have the address of where you're currently living. Now, that address cannot be a PO box. The embassies won't view a PO box as a physical address. So you have to provide your physical address and the name on a document stating that that's where you're currently, whether that be a bill or whether that be a residency card, whatever it might be. Just you have to have proof that you're currently living in that country, so that way they can make that transfer. And you'll send that proof of residency to your case manager that you're working with. And that from there, the case manager will send that to the attorney, and the attorney will make a request on your behalf to the embassy to transfer your case to a different embassy. A lot of times, why these nurses, whether that be you or friends of yours that why they end up having their embassy transferred to a different location is because either they're currently not living there and they have no means of being able to travel to the original embassy location. That's typically the only reason that a nurse should ever transfer their embassy, is because of the fact that they are not currently living in that country and they are not capable of traveling to that location that they were originally assigned. Like I mentioned, this isn't something that we want to do all the time, just because this can delay the process of receiving an embassy interview notice. When you're transferring an embassy you're transferring your case to a different embassy, there can be some delays in that process. It could take some time to be able to make that transfer. And by the time that the embassy actually receives your case, and then they end up having to take their additional time to be able to schedule an embassy interview. So there is some risks involved, and that's why we highly recommend that you do it as soon as possible. Like I mentioned, stage 7A at the fee bill stage is the best time to do it. However, it can be done later on. If it's an emergency at that time that we need to make that change, then we can go ahead and do so. But just understand that there is some risks involved in doing that. It can delay the process.
Yeah, I agree. I think what comes to mind the most when we're discussing embassy transfers, I know that it is hard on the attorneys. They have to do that process. So on behalf of our in-house attorney and our outside attorneys, they would probably prefer, if at all possible, to not have to transfer embassy locations. It just really does slow down your petition. But they do recognize the fact that sometimes, let's say you're working in the Philippines and then your contract ends and then you have an opportunity to perhaps maybe work in the UAE, and you originally filed with your petition being in Manila, and now it looks like we're going to have to switch over to Abu Dhabi. We totally understand that, and attorneys are more than happy to work on that embassy transfer. And Christian made a very good point. Please try and do it as early as possible. Doing it late in the game, we've seen people actually get an embassy date and then a nurse reach out and go, I forgot to tell you, I can't actually attend my interview because I'm no longer in Manila. And then you can only imagine now we have to reschedule your appointment, and then that really delays things. And we just want everything to be as efficient as possible. And as case managers, we're always going to give you honesty and best practices. So sometimes it's hard, the things that we're directing you to do, but we do it because it is really the best for your petition. And I don't know if I've talked about it before, but I am an immigrant myself. And so I've gone through this process, and I want everybody within the sound of my voice right now to know that I have felt everything that you have felt, every stage, every wait, every frustration. I've asked all the same questions, and I'm here in the United States, and that will happen. If you are patient and follow the direction of your case manager, you will absolutely make it. And here I am, living proof. I'm working with WorldWide and so excited to do what it is that I do and be your director. And Christian's an amazing senior case manager. I couldn't ask for a better team. Thank you, Kim, our other director, and Amanda, senior case manager on chat today. They've been amazing. And I think we're off to number one and then some Q&A.
That is correct.
All right. Our number one question that we get asked, what do I need to do to prepare for my embassy interview? Well, the number one piece of advice I'm going to give you and that all of our case managers are giving you is please keep your appointment. That is the best preparation we could ever tell you to do. A lot of times you're worried and think, hey, maybe I just can't make that, or is it better if I just reschedule? And no, not better to reschedule, better to keep that appointment. Even if perhaps you have a dependent that can't come with you at that time, still better to keep your appointment. So your case manager is always going to encourage you, please don't reschedule, please keep your appointment. I know pandemic has really turned timelines upside down. They have turned, just requirements upside down. And so we have seen appointments get rescheduled in a timely fashion, but then we've also seen appointments take months to get rescheduled. And we certainly don't want to see anybody in that situation, especially if you're getting closer to retrogression, which we didn't really touch on retrogression today, and we don't really need to, because I think all of us know, the circumstances around that. But, the more timely you do things and keeping your appointment, that is absolutely number one best practice. So should you need to reschedule, if there's urgency or crisis, or if there's life change of any kind, always go to your case manager. Please try not to do this on your own. Go to your case manager first, get the proper direction. They will guide you and direct you in the best way to do that. I know that some embassies say absolutely have to reschedule. Please make sure that it is no more than 3 days before your appointment. So if you have to, you can reach out to the embassy, go online. Please don't leave it any later than 3 days before your appointment. And you might possibly actually see visible appointments that are available and grab that. Now, we are experiencing right now, the Abu Dhabi embassy, a lot of frustration with our nurses. They all have appointments, and now they're being pushed out to July. So we understand that this is going on. And as Christian and I have said before, we truly wish we had more control over the government and the embassies, but we do not. So when they push those appointments out, and I get asked, what would be the best thing to do, Ma'am Marlo? Do I take that new appointment? Yes, absolutely. If an embassy is pushing your appointment out, then you would need to honor that new appointment that they are presenting to you. And I would say absolutely make sure that all your dependents that you have listed on your petition are in attendance. It does happen sometimes where they're in another country. So we have our nurses perhaps working in the Philippines and their family are living in a different country. And especially during the height of the pandemic, it made it really challenging for them to fly and to travel. And we couldn't get family members to the embassy to meet with the primary applicant. That was challenging, but it does work out in the end. It just means that you would need to have an appointment scheduled for your dependents, because they do need an appointment. So you can still attend your embassy interview, and then you would still need to reschedule for your spouse or for your children that were not able to attend. Oh, I think I had one more thing in my mind, and golly, I think it just slipped my mind. I'm sorry. I can't think of anything else. Christian, what did I miss?
I can't really think of anything else either. I think that was pretty good.
All right. And we didn't talk about 221Gs, but don't fret. If you get a 221G, it's really just the embassy's way of saying, hey, we're just missing a document. But once you get us that document, we do our administrative processing, and then everything kind of pushes through. So don't worry if you should get a 221G. It is okay. We will work through whatever challenge you're going to come up against. You've got a whole team of people working with you to make sure that those all get resolved. So I think we just want to make sure that you feel confident and safe and secure and supported at all times.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Those are our top 10 topics. I know there are quite a few more, so we'd love to hear from all of you. If you feel like emailing your case manager and saying, hey, I thought about that, and I'd really like you to address perhaps this in our next installment of your Ask Your Case Manager. It's really kind of a fun series. It gives us an opportunity to connect with our nurses. We only get a chance to chat with you during emails or perhaps the occasional phone calls. So this is a really nice opportunity and experience, and a really great venue to connect face-to-face with everybody. All right, we're going to open the floor for Q&A. Kim, Amanda, do we have any questions?
Okay, all right. So right now we are on our Q&A session, but before anything else, I just want to introduce myself. So I'm CJ Campos, and I'm the Applicant Engagement Manager here in WorldWide HealthStaff. And just like all of you guys, I also, we've been through all the process because my wife is also a WWHSS nurse. So she's working right now here in the US, and me, I'm working with WWHSS to help you all achieve your American dream. And we were so thankful. And this company really is the best thing that happened to us. So also, if you have questions in your process, always reach out to your case managers. And also a reminder to all of you that we don't have an official WhatsApp group chat. So maybe we will create that sooner. And also a replay link for this webinar will be provided within 24 hours after this presentation. Okay, so let's proceed with the first question. Okay, so this question is, let's see, this one is from Frank Lim. Okay, so this one, while I'm still waiting for my interview date, can I travel to a different country for tourism, like Singapore or USA? Will that affect my DS-260?
Amanda, I'll say yes. Yes, it will. Don't travel. Go ahead, Amanda. You can elaborate.
Yeah, so typically we discourage specifically traveling to the U.S. can sometimes affect your application, definitely in the earlier phases of the process, when your petition's in the process of being approved. So we do typically discourage that. In terms of traveling to other countries outside of the U.S., if you're traveling to visit family or you're traveling for work, that typically will not affect your status with your DS-260, but we try to discourage applicants from coming to the U.S. on a different visa during the immigration process, because that can flag your current immigrant intent visa.
Okay, awesome. Next question is from Julie Bell. So she said her application for now has been delayed due to my medical clearance. Her question is, do I need to request for a new reconfirmation letter once I'll receive my new ID?
So your reconfirmation letter needs to be a maximum of 30 days from the date of your embassy interview. And you would need to be able to get another reconfirmation letter, and that's honestly not a problem at all. So if your appointment is pushed out another 30, 60 days, you would need one, but don't worry, just let your case manager know as soon as possible. Also, a gentle reminder is really helpful, because if we're getting rescheduling done 2 and 3 months ahead, it's really helpful for you to just say, hey, don't forget, please remember my reconfirmation letter time is coming up. And then that gives us lots of time to reach out to your employer.
Okay, awesome. All right, next question is, if I started my contract as single, but in between the period I got married, can my case manager still help me get my spouse to the U.S.?
Christian.
That's a great question. So on the slide that I had talked about, and I believe it was number 10 of the top 10 questions. If you have recently got married throughout the immigration process, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to provide your marriage certificate. Be sure that it's the original. And if you got married in the Philippines, it has to be a PSA copy. You'll also have to provide your spouse's birth certificate as well as their passport. And you can go ahead and send that information, those documents, to your case manager. And your case manager will then inform the attorney that you would like to add your spouse to your petition. And the attorney will be able to go ahead and communicate that with the NVC and be able to get your spouse added.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I can relate with that question because my wife started as single during her immigration process, and we got married, and I think I was added during the FEBIL or DQ. All right, so next question. This question is from Alice. So she's asking can I include my adopted daughter as a dependent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you will be able to add your adopted daughter. You're going to have to provide the legal documents stating that you are your daughter's legal guardian in order for your adopted daughter to be able to be added to your petition. And you'll have to provide the other documents as well. You'll have to provide their birth certificate and their passport, along with that legal document stating that you're their legal guardian.
All right, awesome. The next question is from Tendai. She's asking if one of my accompanying family members is out of my home country, does he need to travel back to the home country during the consulate visa interview?
So we would encourage you to all attend your interview at the same location. We do know with some travel restrictions and things going on, sometimes it just might not be possible with the timeline. If it's an emergency and your dependent cannot attend the interview with you, as Marlo expressed, you will still go to your interview with all the dependents who are able to make it. And then at your embassy interview date, you can let the consular know that you need to transfer the location for the embassy for your dependent, and they'll be able to assist you with that.
Okay, awesome. And on to our last question. Is the passport of the dependent mandatory at step 4, even if they're not coming with me?
That's a good question. So if your dependent is not going to be accompanying you to the U.S., you do not have to provide any civil documents for that dependent. If they were going to be accompanying you to the civil documents for your dependent, however, if you're intending for your dependent to fall to join, or if you're intending for your dependent not to be on your petition at all, then you wouldn't have to provide any documentation on behalf of your dependent.
Okay, all right. Those questions are really awesome and really helpful that we answered all of those questions. And also, if we didn't answer your questions, you can also always reach out to your case managers. And again, you will receive a replay link after this webinar within 24 hours. So
thanks, CJ. It's been really great. Thank you so much for connecting with us today. We've had a really, really good time. Thank you again, my case managers. Thanks, CJ, and all of our awesome marketing people. And we will meet with you again, hopefully next month.